You're listening.
You're listening.
You're listening to the Agency Podcast.
Hello, welcome to Agency Fireside Chats. I'm Michael Collins-Tuck.
I'm Keith Jackson.
I'm Howard Whittle.
And I'm Charlie Litchfield.
This week we're talking about how not to do healthcare marketing, and specifically about events. We're going to be looking at the 50k booth reality check, why Events First represents the single biggest marketing investment many healthcare companies make, yet generates minimal demand creation, and your framework promise. Today, we're going to show you exactly what not to do and then what actually works. I'm excited about this. There's 4 of us on here, which is a little bit of an upgrade to our cumulative years of knowledge. Just to introduce everyone on the call, Keith, you have been a healthcare CEO of multiple medical device companies, multiple SMEs, soon to be Master Cutler in Sheffield, and 35 years of knowledge exported to 70 different countries.
That's right.
Good. Yeah, that's quite some CV. Howard, former VP of EMEA for Smith & Nephew Trauma, chairman of Age UK.
Currently chairman of the Board of Trustees, of Age UK York.
And 40 years?
A 36-year career in healthcare and medical devices, sales and marketing.
So we're nearly at the 100 mark. Charlie, former director of the Americas for Touch Medical USA. It's big territory, the Americas. And 20 years?
Yeah, let's go with that.
20 years? All in events as well. That's pretty...
Largely in events, yeah.
Yep. Working with some of the biggest healthcare brands in the world. And I'm 20 years, and it's all I've ever known is healthcare. So look, that is a century of knowledge on this call. There's a lot of success and a lot of what we'll call learning as well. And hopefully we're going to tap into some of the learnings today in the what not to do section. Let's talk about the pressure cooker and why clever people might make bad event decisions. I want to set the scene and talk about what we call the customer hostage situation. So this is when you are a leader in a company and your biggest customer turns around and says, I'm expecting to see you at this conference, even though that might be part of your strategy. Sound familiar to anyone? Anyone want to take an example of when that might have happened to them and the consequences of it? Howard?
Yeah, I mean that frequently used to happen in orthopedics, and it wasn't necessarily your biggest existing customer, but it was perhaps your biggest target customer, and the one who you felt would be most influential in helping you to gain some major market share points. And it is a real pressure. There is a real temptation to jump when they say jump and just do exactly what they say without any questioning, because you are concerned to that otherwise you might upset them and they might tell you never to darken their door again. In reality, it's rarely the case that would happen. And the best approach to take is to start by asking 1 or 2 clarification questions about why they want you to be at their particular conference and in what form your support should take, because it may not always be, to have a huge exhibition booth there. It may be that you can support them in some other way. So it's worth investigating that. It might be better to maybe sponsor a speaker at the conference, or perhaps run a workshop or something like that. So it's always worth asking these questions rather than immediately saying, "Oh yes, of course, we'll be there." The form that needs to take.
Is this relationship management fear masquerading as marketing strategy, do you think?
Yeah, I think you've got to understand what your motives are. So building on what Howard was describing is you've got to really work out why. And I think one of the questions you can ask yourselves as a leadership team is, who are we trying to impress? Are we trying to impress potential customers? Are we trying to impress existing customers? Are we trying to impress our competitors, our peers, or are we trying to impress ourselves? And actually, the sort of, if we're just trying to massage each other's egos, that is not a business case. So we've got to go take a step back and say, actually, if one of the things we're trying to do as an organization is present ourselves as innovative, maybe we just don't keep doing the same habit of going to the same exhibitions and doing the same thing. Maybe actually do something quite different. So, maybe supporting a KOL to speak on the platform about our products. That's one way you can do something a little different, allocate your budget differently. But there are many, many others. And I don't know, maybe if I just go segue for a second, bear with me. I'm sure we've all spent time at exhibitions. Where's the most impactful use of that time? I've always found it's after hours. It might be taking some surgeons, some prospects as well as existing customers, hopefully sit them together for a dinner, for a few drinks, to do some team building activity together, maybe to have a panel discussion outside of the conference about maybe some product development ideas, whatever it may be. That's much more impactful than having the most impressive booth and having it, burdened with lots and lots of faces. So be innovative and be bold. You don't have to keep doing the same things. And if you want different results, you most certainly don't have to keep doing the same.
Charlie, how many times have you seen this amongst your client base? I mean, I always thought customers cared about strategic value, not booth presence.
Yeah, I was counting my fingers there to see whether I could actually fit it onto two hands. The answer is I'm not taking my shoes off in the middle of a podcast to count my toes as well. I've got a couple of real examples, and I love the title we've got for this particular chat about sort of what not to do, essentially, and when it goes wrong, because I've seen it time and time again. I'm going to try and mask the names of the companies that I'm about to talk about, just because otherwise that might be a bit rude. But there was one particular healthcare client that we were working with, and they decided they wanted to attend a particular congress over in the States. It was a cardiology congress because they'd always done so. And to Keith's point, we've always done it. They spent, I know the number exactly, actually, they spent $65,000 on their booth being built and sort of sponsoring the event, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's not including, by the way, the cost of the time of all of the people that were standing on that booth for hours on end, all of their travel costs, all of their wining and dining, Keith, that you were just mentioning, might I add, not with customers, which was a mistake. And they did what they thought was right. They got one of the lead retrieval scanners so they could scan people's badges and gauge interest. So keep in mind that $65,000 amount. They scanned 400 badges across the course of that event. The number of those that actually turned into a qualified prospect, any guesses?
Less than 10%.
7. The cost of that, I mean, I'm actually not going to do the maths in person in my head, but I mean, we're talking, hang on, let me pull a calculator up. Anyone who's quicker than me.
63.
So 65,000 divided by 7. So that means that they were paying $9,300 per prospect. So that's not even a confirmed sale. That's not even sort of, they can't put a value on that necessarily, other than the fact they've invested 10 grand per conversation. That for me was a really good example of, we were talking about data-driven decision-making and things in previous conversations. That for me would be the biggest red flag ever the following year, to say we are going to invest $65,000 in this particular congress. And to both Howard and Keith's point, some of the other cheaper, if you like, or more effective options that you can go down, things like sponsoring KOL or sponsoring a workshop or whatever it might be, thinking a little bit outside the box of just having that physical space that people may or may not come and engage with. That's a huge differentiator. Second example, and then I won't go into any others, but I thought this was quite a key one as well, because we talked about the pressure cooker and the pressure you get, especially from upper management, about, well, our customers are going to be there, our contacts are going to be there, so we must be there. So I think the sentence that I remember being told is we need to make sure that we're seen, and we've got customers there that we want to spend time with while we're at the Congress. So the figure that we were given was their top 3 hospital clients were attending this Congress. And that's why they got a space at this particular conference. The reality of that situation, despite the fact it was all hinging on those 3 key clients, 2 of them never actually bothered showing up to the booth and never spent any time with them while they were there. The other one popped in for a grand total of 2 minutes between lunch and the next session. And that was the value they got out of 3 days of attending a Congress. So I think those are 2 really good examples for me of almost why you shouldn't just be doing it the same way you've always been doing it. What they were doing might have been the right thing, but at the wrong time, in the wrong place, and with the wrong strategy in mind, if any strategy whatsoever.
Okay, so that's a brilliant segue into scenario 2 we've got here, which is called the management visibility trap, and that's when the leadership team demands event present for brand visibility and competitive positioning. How would you've been on the other side of the fence, right? Because Charlie is obviously the event organizer, the commercial supplier of this. Did you see examples of internal politics trumping strategic demand creation decisions?
Yeah, I saw many examples of it. I mean, I was sometimes I was part of the leadership team, and I did try not to fall into these traps. But sometimes, there were people above me in the organisation who were, determined that we should attend a certain event where, perhaps we, at the sharp end, felt it was not the wisest use of time and money and resource. So yeah, I've seen that on many occasions, and again, it is a very strong pressure if the organization's leadership are saying we must be at this meeting because we want our brand to be visible, and if we're not there, we'll be conspicuous by our absence. I've heard those arguments many times, and I think the key thing here is if you can try and make sure that there is a strategic marketing plan signed off at C-suite level, and that marketing plan includes a marketing communications plan, then that definitely strengthens your arm if you want to try and resist that that directive to be at this event at all costs. Because hopefully you can either demonstrate that, well, yes, indeed, it does fit in with the Marcom's plan, but only in this particular way, with this particular presence or with this particular set of activities. Or you can say, well, look, we've got a marketing communications plan, and this event really doesn't fit in with that. We would be much better off attending these alternative events, because quite often it can be the big prestige events that really the leadership team feel that you should be at to bolster the brand. But in fact, it could be attending some smaller regional meetings where you've got a much better chance of one-to-one interface with your key customers that that really do the job in strengthening the brand. So yeah, try and make sure that you've got a strategic marketing plan that the C-suite have agreed to, and that includes a marketing communications plan.
There's a couple of points here I think that Charlie has spoken about previously, which are an event isn't just a moment in time. It's in theory a phase of a campaign.
Yeah.
So to decide suddenly that you're going to an event without that strategic input is effectively a tactical decision. And usually, I mean, to appease a stakeholder either internally or externally, or sometimes a sales team, which we'll come on to next.
Yeah.
But I think the key thing here, which Charlie started off with, is sort of repelling, should we say, that pressure that's put on you to attend the event is actually much easier if you bring data to the table, because having an opinion of, look, I think it would be better if we did these things, is actually often trumped by, well, we've been to that before and look at the return on investment. It wasn't very good. Why would it be different this time?
And I think, look, the thing is that the type of industry that we're in and the type of industry that we're talking about, we're not Coca-Cola, we're not consumerist type products where that brand visibility, and you probably saw me cringe the minute we said brand visibility, because I think in the world that we're in, it's just irrelevant, to be completely honest. Visibility without any sort of purpose or strategy is just expensive wallpaper. It's the photos might look outstanding in the annual report that you put across to the board of this massive booth that you had at a particular congress, but at the end of the day, it ain't going to build your pipeline. And I think, Mike, you were just talking about the next bit, and I'm going to cross over because why not, is the sort of Salesforce revolt and sort of where this crosses into the impact it has on the sales team. Another example that I told you I needed to get my toes out to count these as well, but another example I remember another congress, we had a very excitable sales VP, and there are lots of VPs in America, lots.
An irrelevant job title, I think. I don't know.
I don't want to get too political, especially.
Yeah,
Not Smith and Nephew. My goodness. Yeah.
Well, you're not a Smith and Nephew right now. It's a very relevant job title. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that was in EMEA, so that's different. That's very meaningful. Very, very meaningful. But we had a sales VP insist, quite assertively / aggressively, that the booth size needed to be doubled from the previous year, because that was 100%. That was going to be the thing that boosted their pipeline and boosted their sales for the following year. And sure enough, we did that. I mean, honestly, we were the agency building it at that point. We were like, great, if you double the booth size, then guess our invoice is going to grow in a similar proportion. But this had come from the fact that this VP sales team had been in his ear just complaining that the marketing team weren't delivering any leads. So they were seeing no growth in pipeline whatsoever. And that was kind of where the idea from this had come. Again, coming back to data, and sorry, chaps, you're going to get really bored because I just talk data with everything that I say. We did some analysis on the post-event traffic, if you like, and sort of the type of interest they were getting. And it was amazing because it did, to be fair, show that the overall traffic to their website and to some of the information that they had out there following the exhibition was up by 40%. But, and this is a bit like the whole 412 badge scans, 7 qualified leads, their pipeline was absolutely dead flat. So it had zero impact whatsoever on their actual pipeline and on their actual growth as a business and growing that product. All it had done, coming back to the expensive wallpaper, would make people go, oh, who are they? Because they had a massive stand, but not necessarily the type of people that are then going to make any difference to your company or sell any more of your products or whatever it might be. So again, it was just interesting to be able to prove a relatively arrogant VP wrong, that doubling the space wasn't right. Making the right use of the space was probably the better way of generating that additional pipeline.
Yeah, maybe.
Keith,
Yeah,
what do
can I
you
come
think
in
about-
there? A great
Yeah.
bit of storytelling there, Charlie, that illuminates a really important point. And the point I was going to add is actually a very good test of lot scenarios is the extremes. So if I doubled my expenditure on X, and it might not be an exhibition, but it might be something else, what additional results would I expect to see? Not what have I actually got, but what would I expect? If I'm going to put that extra investment in, what would I expect? And then the converse of that, what if I halved the expenditure? What if we went in lean this year, had half the size of booth, half the number of people, etc., etc.? Would we see a similar number of qualified leads if we did the right things? And the other thing is, just to build on maybe another perspective on this, is sometimes it can backfire. I'm sure we've all seen extremely impressive and perhaps outlandish booths at some exhibitions. And the glitz and the glamour, you do wonder whether that's ego at play rather than a business reality. But in a healthcare system, and most healthcare systems are in the situation where resources are very, very stretched, they're not stupid. How they can tell you've spent tens of thousands of dollars on this booth, tens of thousands on putting on a show. And guess who's paying for it? The customer. So it can backfire. So I think there is a happy medium somewhere about being polished, being professional, but not over-egging it, particularly in a business-to-business market where you're talking to professionals in healthcare where costs are very stretched.
The vanity project syndrome. I must confess, I've worked for a corporate, and I remember making a stand for a conference, and I think we spent upwards of about 30, I think, on the stand alone. And my decision was to try and to make it into effectively the fun fair, because we wanted to make an impression, but we also were in a sector that was very tactile, looking at sports medicine, and those surgeons wanted to get hands-on with things. So we had to go to an entertainment stand. And it was very busy. It was very popular. People used everything. I know that because all the samples were used at the end of it, and I got told off when I sent them all back, and we'd spent an extra $5,000 on samples. So that was excellent forecasting from me. But as an marketing manager amongst other marketing managers, you want to have the best event. You want to get the photos. You want to have people praising your efforts. And there lies the problem. The praise shouldn't be about your efforts. The praise should be about the results that came back as a result of the investment. Howard, you must have stood on some incredible stands, I imagine, globally at Smith & Nephew, didn't you? With like double-decker ones. Did you do any of those?
Yeah, well, certainly at the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons, yeah, the booths were phenomenal from the big corporates, including Smith & Nephew. And yes, certainly I've, been on the first floor of, of a booth before, which is, when you've come from sort of the meetings that we held in Europe, that was quite something. I think only to be outdone by the conferences in China, which they were also pretty in terms of the size and the elaborate construction of the exhibition booths. So yeah, but I think had we got on to talking about the Salesforce Revolt and pushing for the bigger booths and more bigger giveaways and so on and so forth. And again, you can understand that from the Salesforce's point of view. They want to go to a meeting and feel that they're with the company that has the biggest, most impressive booth, and if they're not, they're going to kind of be feeling a bit inferior from the get-go. So you can understand this pressure from them, and also the sentiment that if we don't come up with something elaborate and glamorous, then marketing is not supporting sales, and therefore how do you expect us to to compete effectively? But I think you've got to shift the focus, and I think Keith alluded to this: bigger to better. I think that's the key thing. And if you can be innovative and find a way to construct either the booth itself or your overall presence and attendance at the meeting in a way that meets the Salesforce's objectives, which have to be around quality customer engagement and lead generation. And I think you've got to have an honest discussion with the the sales team leadership before engaging in participating in a conference or an event. And you need to have the sales team be explicit about their objectives for being at this meeting, get them to articulate those, and then design your attendance, your participation in that event accordingly. And that certainly won't always mean having the biggest and most glamorous stand. That's not the best way to maximize customer engagement.
I think there's something I'd add to that as well, and in the spirit of perhaps being a little more controversial than we usually would on these podcasts, but beware the agency that promises an award-winning booth, and going on the hunt for an award-winning booth or an award-winning event, or whatever it may be. Time and time again, I've seen, and it is generally agencies that boast about this event they did that won awards for how wonderful it was. How many of your customers care whether your booth design won an award at the latest congress it went to? The answer is absolutely none. They care whether your product perhaps has won an award for being best in class or whatever it might be. But I think it's very easy to get hung up on that, exactly what we've just been talking about, that vanity, that ego project of I must have the biggest, best, shiniest, most innovative, sometimes for the wrong reasons, event or booth at an exhibition, without any real substance to it. It's just to be able to say it. And I've sat in sponsorship meetings at large scale exhibitions where you are quite literally just sat in the middle of a pissing contest, essentially, where people are just saying, well, actually, my booth is better than yours. It's got nothing to do with the message you're trying to get across or the product you're trying to sort of get into people's hands or the sort of real world issues that you're trying to solve by creating the product you're creating. It's, I've got a bigger LED wall than you. So, and we talked on our last conversation about some of the things that people do on exhibition booths to try and attract more people and more footfall, which it's really difficult to find that balance. Mike, I think it was one of the examples you gave was that one of the most popular stands at a particular event that you went to was one that had a racing game, a Daytona or something like that on there.
Yeah.
What I'd be intrigued to know, because I think it's a brilliant way to hook people in and get people onto your stand. What I'd be intrigued to know, to my point earlier on, is how much of that actually converted into something meaningful afterwards, and how much of it was, oh, no one's ever done this before, let's be a bit edgy and put some racing games on there. Oh, look, board, I've got 3,000% uplift on the footfall on the stand, even though I actually only converted 3 people.
Well, that's your clickbait, isn't it? That's the same thing.
It's exactly that.
It's all
It's
vanity
exactly
metrics, right? If I advertise free cupcakes, I mean, suddenly everyone comes to my website, right? But they don't. It's not the right people, and nor are they likely to do anything about healthcare marketing when they're there. So I mean that makes total sense. I think Howard's pointed out something here which is quite nice and leads into the next scenario, which we've called the messaging meltdown. And you've said, Howard, it's more about having clarity of message, maybe, or clarity of purpose, call to action, clarity of the education that you're giving on the stand over size. Good story I'll kick off here is our creative director, when he came into healthcare around 10 years ago, came with me and went to one of the exhibitions. And he went into the hall on his own, and he came out and he stood in front of me and said, they're all the same. I looked at him and said, what, the reps or what? And he went, no, the stands, they're all the same. And I sort of said, no, Adrian, that's ridiculous because, that stands are more yellow and that one's blue. And he said, every single one of these people are saying the same things. I can't tell one company apart. And in effect, we can all talk about being patient first, which I think 99% of healthcare companies I've ever worked for or with tend to focus upon. But
I'm waiting for the first pharmaceutical company that actually breaks cover and says, no, we're profits first.
Well, do you know what? I would take clinician first.
We're
I'd take
patients.
clinician
We're
first.
patients third. We're shareholders first. Clinicians second. Patients third.
Yeah, the honest farmer, Carl.
Yeah.
I think, but the point of the matter is here, generic messaging could apply to anyone. And I completely understand running a creative agency, creating messaging for people, understanding compliant creativity is above our door. There is a fear of saying something wrong above saying something meaningful. Keith, what's your view on it being impossible to differentiate when everyone sounds the same?
Well, yeah, you can't sound the same. You've got to do something different. And maybe, if I may, just joining a few dots from that conversation, that part of the conversation. You can, if you've got the budget, go big and shiny with your booth. You can have actually some really capable salespeople on your booth. And maybe there's an analogy here with a football team. You can spend lots of money. You can have some really star players. You can look very impressive. But what matters? The results. And so, quite frankly, technique trumps size, doesn't it? It's good if you can have the budget to have both. Well, lucky you. But usually technique trumps size. So it's doing it right. That's what really matters. And here's a thought. Here's a thought for people to ask themselves. If this is the big event of the year and you're investing the fat end of $50,000 in it, do you do any pre-match training? Do you actually get the team together to think about that event as part of your campaign and how you're going to get the best out of it? Are they all on the same page with their messaging? What are you going to amplify? What you're not going to amplify? So have you got it? Yeah. So I would call it pre-match training. We do lots of training with sales teams. Of course we do. We can talk about products. We can talk about sales techniques. We can talk about different customer profiles. But actually, if you've got an event, do we actually do some pre-event training? Do we actually get the team together so we're aligned? I'll leave that thought, and maybe others might chip in with their perspectives on that.
The answer is no.
There we go. There we go.
No,
Well, not enough.
it's a really, really good point. No, it's a really good point, Keith, because the amount of times, and it links into your point about size versus technique. But the amount of times that I would work with a client and we've built the most stunning booth at an exhibition, and then the sales team turn up, usually with a hangover at 8:30, half an hour before the exhibition floor opens on the day. And you're just like, right, what's the plan, guys? Can we get you anything? Do you need anything? Oh no, what event is this again? And to your point, these guys are just there, and this is not a dig at sales teams, but this is a dig at whoever's in charge of the presence at that program, the strategy, and how that links in with the wider campaign. If you haven't prepared, and if you haven't got those talking points, you're going to, well, actually, probably best case, you're going to fall into the trap that Mike was talking about, where you're just one of the numbers. You're not standing out in any way, shape, or form. And worst case, you're not actually even fairly representing your own product, your own services to the customers that are actually interested. And because no one's speaking the same language, no one's got those key talking points. It was something we used to really try and encourage, was do a booth briefing the day before, do a walkthrough, understand what all your competitors have done, what's their messaging out there, how can we differentiate ourselves, even if what's printed on those walls of our booth sounds the same: patient first, we care, we are one, etc., etc. Can we at least sort of elevate what we're saying to customers when they interact with us to make us stand out from the crowd? I think what's been quite promising, what I've seen over the last few years, there was a time where a lot of companies would use agency staff or temporary staff to man booths. That seems to have decreased a little bit now. But that was a really terrifying time, to be completely honest, where they might as well have not bothered exhibiting in the first place, because you're paying people by the hour who weren't really invested in your company at all to stand on a booth just kind of looking pretty and handing out brochures, not really having any proper understanding of what the company was about or what was being done.
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to the football analogy there, you should be, selecting the best team to be at the event. And I've seen many situations where, it's been, oh well, it's your turn to attend this particular meeting, or well, it's in your region, so you'd better go because you'll know some of the local people and so on, rather than thinking, what are the products, what's the messaging behind them that we want to try and convey, and who from your staff, and it should definitely be your staff and not anyone else's, who are the best equipped to deliver that message effectively, and they're the ones who should be manning the booth. It shouldn't be something that anyone sees as a right, just because they haven't been to the last three, and they should be able to go to this one or whatever. So, I mean, that's one thing. And then the other thing, coming back to the the messaging meltdown point, again, it shouldn't be a case that the event is a one-off with a one-off message associated with it. So the messaging you're conveying at the event should be part of your overall product messaging, which again should be part of your marketing communications plan. So it shouldn't be a question of, well, we've got to design some specific messaging for this meeting and treat the meeting as a one-off. Any event you attend should be part of a campaign. There'll be some times when, maybe, you're using that event as a major platform for a product launch or something like that. Then, perhaps you need some specific messaging designed around that. And then certainly you do need the pre-match training that Keith was talking about, that everyone is, fully equipped with all the relevant knowledge around the new product that you're going to be introducing, so it can be done as effectively as possible.
Okay, so I've got a checklist I've just been writing down here, and I'm looking at this as our checklist of how not to run an event, and effectively it's our checklist at the end of the event when we know we've probably done everything wrong. So I'll just read you off some of our points here, okay?
Should I just get my debrief from one of the events that I've run before?
That would be a great idea. Or some of the ones we've done in the past. I think I should make it clear to the audience here. I love that we are speaking incredibly piously about this and laughing about all the common mistakes. And I guarantee everyone that's because we've made them. So
Yeah,
the clear
absolutely.
One, right? We've been Charlie's clients, in a metaphorical sense at some point in time. And he probably would have gone back to the office and banged his head on the desk again, having listened to us. So, okay, look. Let's just go through the checklist, and I'll reel them off one by one. Number one, Dr. Smith is really happy that we sponsored his event and might use our kit. Number two, our CEO says the board loved the LinkedIn photos and are pleased with how visible we were. Number three, the booth size was relevant to our market position. Number four, the marketing manager now has an award on their mantelpiece which says best booth. Number five, the sales director says the team feels really good and happy to work for a company with such an impressive presence at the event. And number six, everybody knows that we're patient first. And I've got number seven, the team had a really nice dinner and feel that they're all bonded. So I think we can agree that was worth the excessive spend, taking everyone out the field and deriving huge amounts of resource into a one-off event, which was a moment in time. Quite nice.
Yeah.
Quite nice.
Maybe one to add, Michael. Maybe one to add. We use loads of samples.
Yeah. Oh, so much trouble for that. What's worse was I dished
Yeah.
What's worse is I dished out a couple of warning letters to some of the reps for overusing samples, and then at the end of the event, turns out I was the most guilty of it. So
I tell you what, I do. There's something I would jump in on that one. And this was from the time before I went out to the US around samples. We used to work for a large British conference, and they were renowned for the samples they used to hand out, despite multiple times of begging them to have industry only or professional only ticketing for those people to come in. They always had sort of an availability for members of the public and things like that to come onto the show floor as well. Honestly, the professionals that were there walked away with maybe sort of one or two little bags with a couple of tubes of toothpaste or whatever it might have been. I saw so many just families that are just coming off the street and going, oh, let's go and have a look at this exhibition, coming out with armfuls of bags of free samples from this conference. So I think the samples one is not an unreasonable example, to be fair.
well, I think there's probably better ways to utilize your resource.
I'm not
than-
complaining either, because I came away with armfuls of samples as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was happy, but yeah.
Well, ironically, I just sent all the used ones back. So moving on swiftly into the next part of this, which is, okay, so we've talked about what not to do. Let's focus a little bit more on maybe what to do. So let's suppose that we have to be there. Let's just suppose that it's we have enough time to do this well, right? But we've decided that this is an event that we have to attend. How can we create unique value there? Probably Charlie, maybe it's worth starting with you, because you obviously have been in situations where I'm sure people have sat in front of you and said, what does good look like?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this?
I think there's so many different aspects and variables to this, but I can definitely give a couple of examples. One of the things that I'd love to go straight back to is something that Keith and Howard were talking about, which was about being innovative about, yes, okay, you accept we have to be there, but in what capacity? And I spoke about a client that was using much more data-driven decision-making over in the States around which congresses they attended, how much they were investing in them, et cetera, et cetera. This particular client realized that there were enough of their key contacts and key customers at this particular congress, they must be there. But they'd run the marketing budget dry, so they didn't have the budget available to be able to put a big swanky booth and hundreds of salespeople there for 3-4 days. So they booked a small meeting space just away from the Congress Center. And they had 4 or 5 of their sort of key sales reps and representatives in the city, sort of on the ground. And they aggressively is the wrong word, but they were very strong in advance of the event, getting in touch with the customers saying, hey, are you attending ABC Congress? We would love to meet you while we're there. And they were booking meetings, and they were just simply sort of saying, right, just come and meet us. We're just around the corner from the Congress, got a fantastic meeting space, got coffee and tea, comfy seating, come and sit and have a chat. They, during that 3-day period, pre-scheduled, I don't know the exact figure, but I know it was between 20 and 25 meetings with proper key accounts for that particular company. Out of that came, I think the figure was 2/3 to 3/4 of those converted into real opportunities. And 4 or 5 of those closed as actual deals within the following 3 months following that Congress. And that was all traceable back to what had happened there. And they spent a couple of $1,000s on renting a meeting room in a hotel that was 5 minutes walk away from the actual event. Some of their sales reps didn't even attend the event itself. So that for me is, albeit quite an extreme example, is an example of where you can be there and you can leverage the fact that a particular event or congress is going on without being there and putting the huge amount of investment that there is in actually sponsoring it, Even sponsoring a speaker there would have been more expensive than what they did, but the value they got out of it was huge. Equally, there are other things you can do, some more valuable than others. We had clients who didn't go for the sort of massive booth, custom built booth they'd gone for, but they got themselves a location on the edge of the exhibition floor, in a shell scheme sort of tabletop stand type way, which was their meeting point essentially. But then they took the money they would have spent on building out a big stand and hosted a symposium at the program, which was much more beneficial from a scientific content perspective, from a data collection perspective in terms of who was attending that symposium. It got them just so much more traction with their customers. So that grey cloud that was hanging over them of we have to be at this event didn't then turn into we have to be at this event standing on a booth waiting for people to come to us, trying to figure out what value we're going to bring and trying to work out how we're going to explain to our bosses afterwards why we've only got 3 names to follow up with after the fact. I think some of those ways of doing it have proved really, really effective. And if people are serious about interrogating their event strategy, but there are still some sort of no-goes in terms of congresses that you still must go to or events you must go to, it's about thinking outside the box a little bit and thinking about how can we be there without the massive overhead of being there.
Yeah,
That's
it
fabulous.
is very good. I can add another example of that type of approach, Charlie. It resonates very strongly. So I was at healthcare event in Hong Kong in May. Big exhibition hall, as big as any I've seen in the States. A lot of companies, a lot of noise, and an interesting reflection, which is clinicians. Well, let's broaden that. Healthcare professionals. When do they go to the exhibition? Usually in the coffee breaks, in the lunch break. Yeah, because they're there actually for educational content, which is in the auditorium. So you've not got a lot of time, and there's a lot of booths, and there's a lot of noise. Actually having something offline, maybe in the lunchtime. And the example I've got is there's a very nice hotel that is literally inside the exhibition centre in Hong Kong. It's the Grand Hyatt. It's a very smart hotel with great facilities. You only have to walk 1 minute from the exhibition hall to be in the hotel. So they ran a buffet lunch, much better than the sandwiches on offer in the exhibition hall. A buffet lunch, hot and cold buffet, and there was a workshop and a mini seminar that lasted exactly the duration of the lunchtime. And we've probably seen this. We've probably seen lots of examples of this type of approach. The room was full. In fact, they were turning people away, and you had a captive audience for an hour. You tell me of any exhibition any of us have been to where you've had a customer captive for 1 hour, listening to what you want to share with them. I can't think of an example in an exhibition.
No, I completely agree. It's what you do around these events quite often, which is much more important than what you actually do within them in your with your exhibition booth. And I think, you know, when you're thinking about the type of presence you should have at an event, it's always good to start with the customer and understand what their expectations of you are, and what their needs are. And it's very rare, I would say, that their need is for you to have a great big glamorous exhibition booth at a conference. It is more likely to be, you know, that they can attend a workshop, or, you know, attend a separate mini symposium on a particular topic, with a couple of really good speakers, and maybe, you know, throw in some lunch so they don't miss out on their lunch break, you know. So it's those sort of things that the customer is often looking for, and that, you know, they feel they'll gain value from, rather than being able to come and visit you on an exhibition booth. So yeah, those things have, you know, definitely got to be considered right up front in your planning of attendance at events. You do also have to recognise, though, that sometimes the event organisers will try and put restrictions on what you can do around these events, and kind of, you know, sometimes will not take kindly if they feel, what you're doing is detracting from, from their objectives really for the event.
In terms of, I'm compiling a little checklist here, which will be the reverse of what to, not to do would now be to do. I'm going to sort of a point on here, which is about delivery when you're there. And there's over a century of experience, things that you've seen people do well on a stand that have got attention and the right sort of attention.
Yeah.
Charlie, do you want to? I mean, let's start with you, and then because I imagine you love a good bit of delivery, right? Because that makes you guys look good when you're delivering events. So
Yeah, and there's a really simple answer, and it's coffee.
Good coffee. Good coffee.
Good coffee, preferably staffed by a barista and not one of your sales team. Yeah, to be fair, it's funny. We talked about attractors for exhibit stands and things last time we spoke, and we were just talking about the racing game. You're going to need a hook of some description, in theory, if you're trying to get people onto your stand that potentially don't know who you are, or you want to turn into a lead or a prospect. You're going to need something that grabs their attention, whether that is scientific and relevant to what it is that you're peddling, or whether it is a video game or decent coffee. There's got to be something. Once you get people onto the stand itself, delivery and technique from your sales team is I would say a given. You need to have people that can naturally have those conversations with customers, understand their needs, and obviously answer their needs with the product that you've got. But I think from a potentially slightly more tactical point of view, it's also use of space. We've worked with a number of clients where we've really had to sell in how to use the space on the stand, and how it doesn't just need to be the product of a creative director's slightly odd brain. There needs to be some logic to it. Without going down the rabbit hole too much, I mean, there are certain requirements of some of the booths that we build where we had to separate the commercial and the non-commercial side of things from a compliance perspective. But beyond that, some of the ways that we would build in private meeting space into a stand that's on the exhibition floor, use some of the AV capabilities that you can integrate into the stand as well, make those interactive so your salespeople aren't sort of reading from a glossy brochure hurriedly and losing their place on the page. They can actually sort of say, well, why don't you pop over here and I can show you a 3D model of a person's brain in detail. Not just because it's the flashing lights and excitement and novelty, but actually because it's a support to those guys that are stood on the booth of using the space and using the technology that's available to them to have productive conversations and to an extent to impress that customer. And again, coming back to what Keith was saying, you don't want to go mad. I mean, having thousands and tens of thousands of dollars worth of virtual reality headsets on a booth might seem like a great idea, but some of those healthcare professionals might be looking at it going, well, that's where my money's going then. If it doesn't add any value. We did an incredible experience. It was actually relatively cost effective that generated some incredible feedback and actually won an award, but I'll put that to one side. Around creating a virtual reality environment that put you in the shoes of somebody with Alzheimer's or of dementia. And it was so powerful, so powerful. That was a great use of a technology like that. I've seen others where it was literally just a 3D view of inside a doctor's office. So the two completely different applications of the same technology. One very, very well done, and one badly.
Keith, good delivery on a stand?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think just thinking about this, you've got three things you're trying to manage or optimize. You've got a budget, you've got time, and you've got space, your booth space. And actually, I think some important points there around, well, how do you make the most of that space? A lot of psychology in that. And I think it should be fairly self-evident, but often it isn't, unfortunately. Is it open? Do people feel that they can easily walk on it? There's no barriers. Color palette, does it feel inviting? And he's a kicker. How many salespeople do you flood the booth with? Because if you've got too many, it doesn't feel inviting. They don't know necessarily that you're a sales team. They don't know they're going to be helpful and talk about the products. They might just think they're other customers. So if the booth looks busy, somebody might just carry on walking on by. So I think there's a lot around how you manage that space thoughtfully, how you manage your time, not just at the event, but before the event with a bit of preheat, warming things up, creating interest. After the event, well, maybe we'll come to that. That's really important. And then how you manage your budget, maybe actually using a smaller budget, but being much more intelligent, much more innovative of how you apply that budget, which we've also talked about. So yeah, budgets, time and space as a triad.
What and what's the message, right?
Yeah, well, that's how you use your time. Yeah, part of the time is the time that the sales team are talking to prospects or customers. So how are they going to use the time of that conversation? You could ramble on about next week's football match, and that might be important as relationship building. But if you've got 12 minutes, let's say, with a person on your exhibition booth, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to make the best use of that 12 minutes when you're talking to a customer on your booth? Or are you just going to wing it and hope at the end of it you've actually got a qualified lead to follow up?
I think at the end of it, the message that they walk away with has to be within 90% of the people that have attended that stand. The look and feel should scream it. The copy that's written on the wall should be absolutely unequivocally clear about what it is that you are looking for that event or that moment to tell them, because an event is a communication. And it's just over a period of time, and your staff should also be completely on message. You talked about pre-training with regard to that. And then I think, Howard, you must have been to events where maybe that wasn't as clear as it could have been.
Yeah, I certainly have always tried to make sure that was the case, but inevitably,
I didn't say they were your
sometimes.
events, Howard. There could have been other people's events where it was.
Oh yeah,
There'd have been
okay. Well,
other people's events.
as far as other people's events are concerned, no, the wrong people on the stand, not capable of delivering the right message, not being well informed enough to to deal with the customers' inquiries or requests. I've seen that happen many times, and that's one of the the biggest faux pas, if you like. But I think anything that allows for interaction is a good thing, and anything that puts a barrier up to that is to be avoided, and whether that's a human wall of too many staff, so the customer doesn't actually feel they can actually get anywhere near the booth, or it's just a range of kind of passive exhibits that doesn't encourage interaction, then those are to be avoided. If you do have a big enough booth to accommodate a private area where you can run workshops, or have the designer surgeon come in and speak to a small invited group of people, those sort of things work tremendously well. So yeah, I mean, I think avoid the passive, avoid the again, going back to the the broadcasting approach. Make things as personalized and as interactive as possible.
I've got 5 points here, and I think there's 6, which would be I mean, I'd like 5, but I think it's going to be 6. And I want to pass this one over to you, Charlie, with a bit of a segue, which is you raised the point about the racing simulator on the stand earlier. And interestingly, it was the sales manager who was so keen on this idea. And I tell you why. It wasn't just because they wanted people on the stand and traffic. It was because they knew that after the event, they could go around and see all of their customers and say to them, I see on the league table you were 7th, or you were, X amount of seconds behind this surgeon. I thought you were better than them, that, and I thought that was an interesting concept from a non-marketeer about what I would think of as a post-campaign or a post-event campaign, a reason to go back. If we are all under the impression that an event isn't just a moment in time, or should not just be a moment in time, Charlie, what have you seen post-event, and what's good, what looks like good in your world?
Well, first of all, I think it's really encouraging to hear what you've just said about the racing game thing, because I think there's a lot of people that would put that in with the mentality of an event being a moment in time, of we must increase the footfall to our stand because that's going to be our measure of success. So to hear that actually this was, not only are we going to get some excitement, not only going to make this memorable, but also we're going to put that leaderboard in the hands of our guys on the road, and they're going to go and sort of use that to segue into conversations with some of these clinician surgeons. That is utterly fantastic. And I think that is the key of broadening that engagement window. And that's essentially what you're doing. Is people have always viewed that event as a moment in time, as that is the peak of engagement, of being able to stand in front of your customers and deliver a message, whether that's your own event or at somebody else's. Being able to stretch that out and make that relevant across a longer period of time is hugely powerful. What does good look like? Using information and insight that you've gained from the event itself to empower conversations in the future with that customer, which you would hope is going to move you closer to a sale. Because let's face it, we're talking about sales and marketing here. We're talking about everything we're doing, whereas we might talk about visibility and messaging and things like that, which are all really important. At the end of the day, what's actually important is the top line. Like we're trying to make sales here. We're trying to generate more money in the business we're working for. So anything that you can gain insight wise from before or during that event that you can take into real life and take to that customer to continue engaging with them and inform those conversations with them, I think is huge. That could be something as irrelevant, and I say that in a very respectful way, as irrelevant as a leaderboard for a racing game. That could be something as relevant, data again, as knowing what educational sessions they've attended when they've been at that particular event, or what content they've consumed on your stand while they've been there, or who they spoke to from your team when they were there and some of the discussions that were there. It can be any of these things, but to Howard's point, it's about keeping it personal. The more personal that approach is to your customers or your prospects afterwards, the more likely they are to actually engage with it, because it generates an emotional connection. It means that you're not just Johnny Stranger from Pharma Company X who's following up a lead that came from a program. It's, oh, actually, that's John. We had a really good chat while we were at such and such a congress, and we talked about this. And he was the one who was sort of showing me how I could get round that corner better to shave 2 seconds off my time on the racing game. Those sort of personal connections are what make the difference in a sea of, and I think we talked about the whole patient first and all that sort of stuff. Everyone, and I chuckled a little bit when Keith was talking about color palette, because we, as an agency, we used to have the blacklist of pharma colors, because all the healthcare companies just seemingly just cycle through the same colors on a year-to-year basis. But it's what separates you from your competition is finding that emotional connection, whether it is around something that's relevant to the product, the industry, the event, or whether that's something a bit less relevant. That's the key. The other part for me as well is building on content. So this is potentially more relevant if you're hosting your own event, or if as a company you are building out a symposium that goes alongside an event, or a standalone that goes alongside a congress. But we all know that our attention spans ain't great anymore in generation TikTok and Vines came before that of 7, 9, 10, 15 second bits of content, we know that our attention span isn't great. So you're not really, even across the course of a 3 or 4 day congress, going to be able to show attendees and customers and HCPs all of the information. So how powerful would it be if you were to stretch that beyond the event as well and actually start to have follow-up events? And those could be virtual, they could be webinars, they can follow whatever format you want. But they are off the back and off the coattails of that program to again keep people interested and keep people engaged. At the end of the day, if people are listening, that's better than, I was about to say, brand visibility, which will make us all cringe, but keeping people engaged with it is the absolute key. And the final thing, and then I promise I'll be quiet, but the gaining feedback is huge. Everyone has been there. We've been to an event and you get the post-event survey, and it's 14 pages long, and you look at it, roll your eyes, and then click the big red X. Post-event feedback and surveys around your particular program, the interactions that people had with your staff members, what they thought of the booth, what they thought of the content, etc., etc. That is all incredibly useful, not only as a hook to keep on interacting with that particular attendee, but also to inform what you do in the future. That's the what. The how is the key in the delivery of that, and getting that into a succinct, easy to consume and easy to work with format is something that people often fall short on. And I've seen so many clients write pages and pages of, would you rate this session on a 1 to 10 basis? Please give comments. What did you think about the speaker? How did you feel when you left the room? People are not going to take the time to do that because they're not as invested in your desire to have those answers as you are. So you need to make it something where you're going to gain really good insight and intel without losing people's attention, because then you just won't get anything at all.
That is some brilliant insight from 20 years of running events there. That's quite a nice bit of a finishing statement. But I will do on a summary. I think we had 7 of what not to do, and I've written down a 7 of what to do. So I'm gonna read it off here. This is based upon this call. I didn't have this written down beforehand, so I've been writing as we've been going. Century of experience says, 1 century or just over of combined collective experience says that the right way to do events is to ask the following 7 questions. Number 1, go or not go, should be answered by, is it within your comms strategy and aligned within your comms strategy and your overall marketing strategy?
Yep.
Number 2, how you show up is important, and that's the type of stand. You might not have to have a full-on large stand. There are other options available to you. Point 3 is about the pre-preparation that you do. Outreach to people to book meetings. You're there for engagement. Pre-book the engagement. Don't take a chance on the engagement. And pre-preparing your sales team. Getting the squad together and making sure that they are on message. Number 4, what do your audience want to hear about? And what do you want them to hear about? This has to be decided before you go. How are you going to deliver that message? What is the message? Does this stand tell people what the message is? Number 6, data. Are you collecting data? Is that data going to be utilized in your CRM? What insights are you looking to derive from it? Therefore, what data do you need to collect and how are you going to collect it? And then lastly, I've got written here, keep communicating. So post-event, what are the reasons for you to get back in touch with people? Because what was the point you were there for in the first place? I think that's pretty good. And that's, if I'd known that 20 years ago, just think of all the mistakes we could have avoided. That'd have been great.
Wouldn't have been anywhere near as fun though, would it?
I've enjoyed this chat. It's been excellent. Thank you so much for your time, and hopefully the audience will get some good tips, tricks, and better practice from this. So I look forward to the next one we do.
Yeah.
Thanks very
Enjoy
much.
the chat.
you.
It was good.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, chaps.
Bye.